Hi there, it's Dilker with Moss Hollow Pottery, and today I want to do a video on working with a 7-warp braid. Now it's not really a kumihimo braid, but it can be worked on those kumihimo boards. We're working with Czech glass mixes because this is a companion video for the book that Dilker and I are writing called Czech glass inspirations. This mix has been picked over a little bit. As you can see, I've got not a great variety of sizes and shapes, but a pretty good variety of color. And I wanted to sort of show you what you can do once these mixes get picked over. I tend on these 7-warp braids to make a focal section and then 2 side sections of just seed beads, and then finish it in the back with chain or something. Anyway, here are some of the beads that were in this mix. And I was playing around. I really started with this drop up here, this purple drop. And it turned out that I didn't have enough of them. Then I found this, I think it's a 6mm fire polish, and I didn't have enough of those either. So what I'm going to do is combine those two onto 1 warp. I had these angel wings, which are not a great shape for a kumihimo braid, but they will work. So one of the warps is going to be that. These little teardrop beads I happen to love, and I think they work well in this braid. So 2 of the warps are going to be this bead, and 2 of them are going to be this. These 2 are actually the same size and shape of bead. They're just different colors. This is a black AB, a jet AB. And it's got some of the purple and some of the aqua in it, so it's going to work out well. This is also the Jet AB. These 2 are the same colors. This one is a 4mm round. Then I was playing around with the colors on this one are really great, but it's a cathedral bead, and the shape is really not good for kumihimo, so I decided I'm not going to use that one. Then when I was playing around earlier, I thought, well, you know, maybe if I brought in a 3rd color, it would work. The problem on this one is the bead is small and the color is olive rather than a brighter green, and it's not going to read very well. So I've decided that I'm not going to use this one, and I'm not going to use this one. So this is the focal piece is going to be built out of that. Then I needed beads to put on the sides. These are 8/0 Czech seed beads in a transparent aqua. And I'm going to put 1 warp of a size 3 fire polish in with this. So 6 of my warps will have this bead on it, and 1 of them will have this on each end of the focal section, which will be made out of this. Then my last design consideration was color of s-lon. And this color works really, really well with these beads over here, but not quite as well with the seed beads. This color works really well with the seeds and will be just fine with these because of the dark beads that are in here well. So I decided to go with this one, and I believe that this one is nickel. It's the Tex 210. I'm going to pull 7 1-inch pieces of the Tex 210. I'm going to string my beads, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've got the beads loaded, and I'm going to be using a double density board. This is twice as thick as the original boards when they first came out, because I'm using all s-lon. Having the extra friction that's created by the double thickness of foam is useful. I've put my 7-warp sticker on it, and I'll show you how I'll be working that in just a bit. Now, what I did was, as I told you, I have 2 of them that have the frosted drops, 2 that have the black AB drops, 1 with, I think these are 3 or 4mm on the ABs, 1 with the angel beads, and 1 that has a mix of drops and round fire polish. And what I did on this, sometimes what I'll do is put this has 28 beads. So sometimes I would put maybe 14 at one end and 14 at the other end. You know, maybe flank the purple drops in the middle with the turquoise beads on the outside. But in this case, I went ahead and I did every other bead. So this will give the bead sort of an even appearance, or the braid an even appearance. When it comes to lining these up and putting them on the board from a design consideration, generally speaking, if I'm using, say, 3 colors, I'll put the largest bead first, working down to the small beads. In this case, they're all pretty much all small except for these. And so what I decided to do was, this is a spiraling braid structure, so I don't want every other one, every other color. What I did was, I'm going to put this in 1, this in 2, 2 that are more or less the same color in 3 and 4, this one in 5, this one in 6, this one in 7. On this braid, you'll see that there are 8 numbers on the board. 8, when you load it, is empty. So I'll be loading the first one I showed you in 1, the next one in 2, then in 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, show you how I do that. So this is number 1. What I'm going to do is pick it up and pull it so that the beads are under the board. The next one I'm going to pick up, and I'm going to put it in number 2. Pick up the next one, put it in number 3, the next one in number 4, next one is going into number 5, next one's going into 6. This last one's going into 7. Okay, so now I've got all of the beads on the bottom. I've got 7 strings on the top. What I need to do is pull these strings all up to the top and tie a knot in them. Because this is a 7 warp braid, there's no folding it in half. You can't get away from starting this one with a knot in the center. And what you'll find is, because these beads are different sizes, that even though I started with a yard on each one of these pieces of s-lon, I'm going to end up with, let me get these straight, I'll show you in a minute here. You're going to end up with uneven cords here, because this one obviously had more beads on it than this one did. It doesn't really matter. A yard is a lot. So just tie it in an overhand knot. Make sure you get all 8 of them in there. Pull that tight. And your braiding is going to start from this point forward. And what I'll do is just pull each one of these beads on the bottom down until I have the knot in the center of the top of the hole. I'm just pulling these down. This helps keep them from getting tangled. So just kind of pull, see if I back the camera out a little bit so you can see that a little bit better. Just pull this down, keep pulling. Alright, now pull it till you have the knot centered into the board. This will be going down through the bottom of, and this is how you'll start your braiding. But before I start braiding, I'm going to go ahead and wrap each of the warps on the bottom in bobbins. So what I'll do is, oh, one of the things I forgot to tell you, let me just grab one of these real quick. When I loaded the beads, you can see that I've got seed beads, then the decorative beads, and then the seed beads. As this comes out, I'll have, see, I put, I think, 25 seed beads on, so size 8/0. That should be about 3 inches of braid. This, I think, is going to make probably about 6 or 7 inches of braid, and then I finished it with 25. And so that's a nice focal section. So when I put these into the bobbins, I just kind of roll it up a little bit, and then I slide some of the beads into the bobbin, keep rolling, slide beads in, and I'm going to leave the seed beads out, and I have maybe 5 or 6 inches of braid. I have a different template on the back of this disc, that's why you're seeing that. So I'm going to go ahead and keep rolling these up, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've got all my bobbins on, and as I told you at the start of the video, I was going to put these 3mm fire polish in place of seed beads on one of the warps, and that's what I've done. So I've got fire polish on one to start and finish, and then I've got seed beads on the other 6 to start and finish. So here's the way the braid goes. It's sort of a double progression braid. Let me back out a little bit. Okay. And even though there are 8 numbers on the board, there's always one number that's empty, and it's always the next consecutive number that moves into the empty one. So in this case, I have to make the nub, so that means some braid with no beads. So number 1 is going to move into number 8. Number 1 is now empty. Number 2 moves into number 1. Number 2 is now empty, so number 3 is going to move into number 2. 4 goes to 3. 5 goes to 4. 6 to 5. 7 to 6. 8 to 7. 8 is now empty. 1's going to go to 8. I'm going to do this a couple of times around in order to be able to make sure that I have enough of a nub to put my finding on. And again, in this case, because I had to tie a knot in the end, there's no way to fold 7 1/2 or 3 1/2 and come up with 7. So I had to use 7 individual cords. And with a knot in the end of it, I need to make sure that I have plenty of room to either whip it off and glue a cap on, or whip it off and put a wired-on cap. Doesn't matter what number you stop dropping a bead on. I'm going to do a little bit more there. And this is, whenever you stop on this one, it's always easy to know where you are, because whatever notch is empty, it's the next consecutive high number that goes into it. So if 4 is empty, it's 5. Working for the camera and not being able to let these warps hang down very long is a little bit of a problem. You could use a weight under it if you wanted to on the center. I don't use weights very often, but if you're inclined to using them, that would be fine. All right, so I've got enough that I've got about 1/4 of an inch of braid there. So now number 8 is going to move to number 7. I'm going to start dropping beads in it now. And the way you do that is pretty much the same way that you drop beads into anything. Just grab a bead, slide it in. It needs to stay under. Let's see if I can get some light on that. It needs to stay under the warp that it's crossing. And with this being a small seed bead, that's not really a problem. But sometimes if you're using big beads, they'll want to pop out. And if that happens, what you'll need to do is just grab your thumb. Wait a minute. Get that guy down there. And just hold it in place as you move it. And just make sure that before you throw the next warp over, that the bead below there just stays where it's supposed to. Now what's going to happen is I have 25 beads on all 7 of these warps that have to be worked before I get into the interesting beads. So I'm going to work that. I'm going to put you on hold, work it, and then come back. Right, so now I've finished braiding the part that had just the seed beads and the 3mm fire polish on it. And in this particular braid structure, in the 8 warp braid structure, this would have made right around 3 inches. In this particular 7 warp structure, it made 3.5 inches. So that's fine. But now I'm ready to start dropping beads other than the seed beads. And because these beads are small, this probably isn't going to be that difficult. But let me show you what happens. So number 5 is empty. Number 6 has to come to number 5. So in goes the drop bead. And again, it has to stay under number 3 as it passes to number 5. Now 6 is empty, so 7 has to come to 6. Here I have a smaller drop bead. What you want to do when you're working with this is try to keep your point of braiding in the center of the hole. Working with small beads like this, the board that has the 20 millimeter hole in the center instead of the 35 millimeter would have been just fine. But this is the board that I had available. Here comes one of these angel wings. Now, in an 8 warp braid, this would almost certainly fall into the braid so that part of the wing was actually going into the center of the braid because that 8 warp braid is hollow. This one, it looks like what it's going to do is fall so that it sits. Oh, no, there's half of it going in the center. Let's see what happens with this. You know, so we just keep going. 2 goes to 1, 3 goes to 2. Now what will happen is this will get a little crowded down here in the center with some of these beads, and you just kind of have to manhandle them. You've got to push them to get them to stay where you want them to be. And that's more so when you're working with large beads, and I do love this braid when I'm working with big chunky beads. Again, try to keep that point of braiding in the center. Comes another one of these angel wings. See how that falls. Yeah, it looks like that's going to fall on the outside. Don't think we have quite enough of it done that you can see it. But what I'll do is I'll put you on hold, and I'll come back when I have a little bit more of this done so you can take a look at it. All right, so I'm back, and I finished braiding the entire piece. I've got both of the ends done as well. I want to walk you through some of the things that happened with this center section, though, because it's kind of interesting. I have never used these angel wings in a braid before, and I wasn't quite sure how they were going to come out. When they fell with the AB side up, they're really quite stunning. So that was a pleasant surprise to see how that happened. As you can see, those purple teardrops are really wonderful, and they add a lot of texture to this piece. I wish I had had enough of those to do an entire strand of them. So that's something you might want to keep in mind when you're working with your mixes, is looking at what you've got. And most shapes will work in a braid as long as they don't have a top to bottom hole in them, something that has a vertical hole. Anyway, it's time to finish. You can see what I've done here. Those little fire polishes in with the seed beads really give just a little bit of added interest there. I seem to have an awful lot of shadow here this morning. Let me see if I can move a light over here if that works. Okay. So anyway, when we started, I started with a full yard on each one of the warps. This was the starting. Remember I said that, let me see if we can get that in focus. There we go. That because the size of the beads gave us different lengths, that we ended up with different lengths overall. We're going to end up ending with different lengths as well. So it doesn't matter. Pull a yard if you're working on a small necklace, 1.5 yards or so if you're working on something more. I want to show you how to finish them now. I'm using cones today. 7 pieces of s-lon, 7 warps of s-lon, gives you a braid that's about 2.5, maybe 2 3/4 of a millimeter. And I don't happen to have any end caps that fit that. So what I've done is I've bent a head pin, put the head pin through the braid, bent it, whipped it, then I glue it so that the whip holds. Now you can use any glue that you want on this because the glue is not holding the cap on. The glue is just keeping the braid from unraveling. So I'm going to do it for you here on the other end. Let me get my magnifiers here. Okay. So I have like a 3-inch head pin. What I'm going to do is insert that head pin in through the braid. And this takes a little work. All right, let me put you on hold while I try to do this. Okay, putting that out in front of the, trying to hold it in front of the camera and get enough pressure to push that through is a difficult thing to do. But anyway, you can see I've got the head pin actually going through the braid. What I'm going to do is take a pair of pliers and hold that head pin, the head of it, in place, and then bend the shaft of that pin up alongside the braid. Then I'm going to whip. I'm using size D s-lon. Nymo's a good choice as well. Any kind of a nylon thread. You want something that's tough and not very thick. And I'm actually going to whip that head pin right fast to the braid. Okay. And you want to keep it down fairly close. You know what? I've got that up a little bit too far. Let me get the magnifiers off. I don't need them for this part. Alrighty, let's try this again. Slide that down. Alright, so I'm going to tie that off. I'm going to tie it off with a surgeon's knot. See if I can get that down here so you can see it. So that's over. Okay, the surgeon's knot has a double loop. It comes around once, and then the tail comes around one more time. Then you pull that tight. I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing on the other side. So one, and then around one more time, and bring it down nice and tight. And I think I've got something up above there, do I? Let's pull that down. All right, now just trim and glue. I'm using super glue gel just because it's what I had, but any glue will work on this because, as I said earlier, it's not, I want to get that down so I don't cut it when I cut the knot off. It's not the glue that's going to hold this in place. I'm using a cone. So all the glue is doing is keeping that whip from coming undone and maybe sinking into the braid itself so that when I cut it, as time goes by, it won't work itself out. All right, so I've got that. So now let me grab, oops. So now what I have to do is trim all of this. So I'm going to trim everything here. So first I'm going to get rid of those cords that I whipped with. Then I'm going to get rid of the braiding cords, and I want the knot to go away. And I did cut the whipping. I'm glad I glued that. This slides right on and slides right down next to the beads. Now, this has a fairly large hole in the top, this cone. So what I like to do is take a bead from the mix. In this case, I took a 4mm fire polish and put that on the end. And then I need to make a wrapped loop. For those of you who don't know that, let me get some round nose pliers. Take chain nose pliers, bend it out to a 90-degree angle. Take your round nose, not quite 90, there we go. Make a loop on the top jaw, switch your pliers over, make a loop, finish the loop on the bottom jaw, and bring the tail around. Okay, and then trim. Straighten that out. And then we need to do the same thing on the other end. I'm going to trim the whipping cords, trim the braid. This is hard to do when you're wrapping your hands around the tripod the camera's sitting on. Okay, there we go. Trim the braid. All right, where's just the cone over here. Slip the cone on. Slip the bead on. Okay. Make the wrapped loop so this comes out to a 90-degree angle. Okay. Nip that. Okay, so then let's get this out of the way. I have 2 jump rings and a clasp, and all I'm going to do is put those on here, and that will finish the entire project. This project came out with the findings to be 16 inches overall, so it will be a choker length. If I wanted to make it longer, I could have added, before I do the wrap loop and then put a little bit of chain on it. Or add, I put 25 of the seed beads, add 30 or 40 of the seed beads to make this part longer. The focal part, I find when you do anywhere from about 25 to 30 beads, comes out between 7 and 8 inches long. So anyway, that is the 7-warp braid. That's all there is to it. Give it a try, have some fun with it, because it really, really comes out looking good. And that little angel wing bead worked out a whole lot better than I thought it would. So don't be afraid to give those new shapes a try.